Hey, this is Michael Port, and I am here with my friend Chris Brogan. This is something that I do every once in a while. I'll bring some friends. We will interview them, and I say we because often you submit questions in advance, and then I'll take your questions, off the Google Hangout, and then I'll feed them over to Chris as they come up. But there's no agenda other than to serve you in the best way possible. If you're not familiar with Chris, I'd be surprised, but I'm going to give you the short bio because this is the bio that he shares. And one of the reasons I love him is because he gives you 3 lines, not 3 pages of bio. So it's another testament to his experience level. So he provides simple plans and projects for business success. So he's the CEO of Owner Media Group and is a sought after public speaker. And he really is, and he's really quite good, great storyteller. He's also the New York Times best-selling author of 8 books, and he's working on his 9th. And we were just chatting about it before this started, and it's one of the cooler ideas I've heard in a long time. And if you want more, you can go to chrisbrogan.com. One of the things that he also has is a Facebook group that is one of the most active Facebook groups that I've seen online, and it's the Secret Team, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they search Secret Team, they would find that in Facebook.
Yeah, it's and the really easy link is just cbrogan.me/secret. And as of the time you and I are having this chat, I can't remember. I think there's just under 14,000 members right now.
Oh my God.
So
that's awesome. 14,000 members. Jesus. Okay. So that's more people than actually live in my town, which is fantastic.
That's like 5 of my town.
So there's the topic that I wanted to focus on today. And I'll let you drive the conversation. It's such a pleasure to have someone who can. But the issues that I thought would be really relevant are around strategies and secrets for business growth in the age of distractions. We're very distracted. Just getting things done seems difficult for people because they are distracted. And then, of course, getting people's attention because they're distracted is often very difficult. So this is a project you've been working on for some time. And when I looked at your work around it, some of the things that came up for me were around the question of if people can buy from anyone, why would they buy from you? It's one of the issues that I think you address very well. So that's something that I think would be helpful to the audience. Also, one of the things you call the computer a rectangle of glass, and of course it seized our attention. So how do we show people that we care about their success beyond the sale? I think you do very well. A couple more that I want to address, and then we'll go back to the beginning. In this world in which we live, one of the things you address is how every business must become a media business of some kind so that we can rise above the noise. But how do we rise above this noise if everyone is becoming a media business? And then why does technology from the 1990s hold some of the best hope for your future success? And this is another area that I think you bring a lot of interesting ideas to. So let's start with, if people can buy from anyone, why would they buy from you? And I don't mean just Chris, of course, but each person who's listening in now.
Well, the onset of that question came in sort of a valley of doom sort of moment in myself, thinking, why do people call me for speeches anyway? Because, I know why they used to call me, because gee whiz, this digital stuff is neato, and we need this whiz guy, Chris Brogan, he'll figure it out. And then the phone kept ringing, and I kept wondering, well, why do people want me to come to conferences? It must be because they heard I was a nice guy. I don't know. And then I realized that the same problem was coming up for many, many, many companies and organizations and even individuals, which was that in a world where we can buy from anyone, why should we buy from you? So this major national auto parts company had me at their annual event. And really what they wanted me to say was, don't worry, Amazon isn't a threat. Don't worry, Google isn't a threat. Don't worry, anyone who knows anything about a computer can find the auto part, and they don't need to go into your store where you could lie to them. And of course, I said, hello, Emperor, you're naked. And in that moment, the real answer to the question always is that relationships are always going to be better than what's on your shelf. the relationship of how you get people to what they need, the way you treat somebody is always going to be what wins in a world where everything is commoditized. So I did the same thing with college booksellers. College booksellers had this big conference where they have all the bookstores and all the different colleges. Man, books cost $1 billion. Their books are being digitized now, so there's no need to even walk into that store. How do they make revenue? And so we started with relationships. And when people hear that word, one of two things happens. They go, well, duh. Or they say, that sounds squishy and I don't really know what you're getting at. And so then what I have spent most of my time doing on various stages and in books and whatever is giving people really actionable ways to go after that. And I think, Michael, that in most cases, these are the areas that we think we should get to. But I think people get so busy doing I don't know what, because I would assume the customer is probably the most important part of their puzzle, that they never get to those things. And so the other thing I work hard to do is refocus companies on how do they build a better relationship where maybe content leads to community, which earns the right to sell and serve, which would be a marketplace.
So if your job in part is to demonstrate to them or illustrate to them or reveal to them that the emperor is naked, that's often very confronting. And on one hand, that's why they would choose you, because you're going to go and you're going to tell them the truth. And often they need to hear the truth. At the same time, people don't always want to hear the truth, and they may avoid the person that is going to come in and, pull back the curtain, so to speak. And I know that a lot of people who are listening right now do something similar in that, their job in part is to provoke or to confront or to help people see the world in a different way. So how do you manage that, that challenge of being the person who comes in and is provocative, but still getting them to hire you, even though it may make them nervous?
I'm a furrier Dr. Phil meets Mary Poppins meets improv comedian. So there needs to be a little bit of tough love going on. There needs to be that Dr. Phil tough love. Mary Poppins, just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. And an improv comic where I say yes and. So what I say is, wow, this is horrible. And what's great is you could do this. And I usually like to make examples of things that make people giggle or something. So for instance, I will talk about the fact that when I go to the bathroom, the automatic toilet knows that I'm done and it flushes. So it knows more that I'm there than any company seems to know that I'm there. And people will forever, kind of get a chuckle out of that because I'm joking about a toilet on stage usually. Yeah. And then I say, so now while we're laughing, and that's this, by the way, I will tell you my only real secret in professional speaking is if I make you laugh, it triggers a bunch of dopamine and it makes you go, I'm going to receive whatever he says next because I liked the last pleasure hit. And then I give them the bullet. So what I do is I go, ha ha ha, I'm killing you. And so that kill is usually the thing I really want them to remember the most. So it depends different on, different presentations, but I'll make my joke. And then I will say my kill line, which is whatever it is. Like you need to get a lot more direct with your buyers because of this. And I'll give whatever the example is to the industry. It changes. So in that process, again, it's Dr. Phil, Mary Poppins, and an improv comic. The improv comic part is you have to sort of say your poopy face and you have this great potential. Butts are bad. Sandwiches are bad. We learn in management class, don't ever sandwich praise. You're really good, but you stink, but you're also really good. Never do that. So my joke is be funny and then hurt them and then pick them back up. It's basically Munchausen syndrome. I'm essentially helping them through their own pain, or Stockholm syndrome, all the good syndromes.
So let's go back to the flushing syndrome for a second.
Yes.
Because this is exactly right. Often the toilet knows more about the user than the company does about their customer. So let's talk a little bit about how you continue to develop the relationship after the sale. Because the longer that, I'm in business, I started out on my own in 2003, the more I realize that the value we can provide is greater when we can continue to serve the same people, and the experience for them and for us is more valuable. It's more exciting. It's more worthwhile. So, I've learned more and more about that over the years, and I really love your approach. So I want you to address that, help the audience understand how to make sure that they are focusing on the after the sale dynamic, so that that produces more value for the customer and also for them long term.
People love to ask questions about stats and metrics, but what I like to say back is that you're not ever paying attention to the ones that really matter. The stats and metrics I think that are really interesting to me are who's bought from me more than once, and what have I done for them lately? How have I reached out to them personally lately? I have this opinion. So Kevin Kelly wrote a really great blog post a million years ago called 1,000 True Fans. You just have to Google 1,000 True Fans and you'll find it. It's at the technium dot something or other. And what Kevin Kelly was saying was that, most of us, most businesses could sustain themselves with 1,000 true fans. 1,000 people who really dug what you did. Now, if you're Coke, you need a few more than 1,000 people, but guess what? We're not Coke. So it's okay. We can still have this conversation. What I find most of us doing is I'm trying to blog my way to a new customer. Or I'm trying to podcast my way to a new customer. Or if only I could write this book, damn it. Oh, if I had this book published, I would have more customers. You don't need more. You need to love the ones that you have. Again, with my, my toilet analogy, I am baffled by some companies where I've spent thousands of dollars who don't want to pay attention to me. And by the way, I'll give you a weird example in my own town. So if I look over this glass in front of me, past your head, I can see a pizza place where I order a salad 2 times a week. And they bring it to my house. And that's why I order from them, because then I don't have to stop working. And when I call at this point, I can pretty much just start to say where my address is, and they'll give me the order because I order the same thing all the time. If I vary from the order, like if I forget to ask for a Diet Coke, they'll just bring me the Diet Coke at this point. They don't even think about it anymore. There's not going to be an order that leaves that building without like the salad, the Diet Coke, and if my kids are home, a pizza. They know the order better than me at this point. What I like about that is I have that Cheers norm in the corner. Everybody knows who I am kind of feeling. And businesses, the most simplest business in the world who has actually transacted a sale has the data to make that true. I can say, Michael, I know that you bought this webinar and that webinar. Judging on those 2 things, I think you're probably going to be interested in this course because, boy, I think this is going to be great for you. I've already said 2 things good about you that what you've already spent your time and money on, that's already 200 times better than Amazon, who keeps trying to sell me a dress. I think I'm a handsome man.
I think you'd look fantastic in a dress, Chris. I think you would.
They always want to sell me a dress. So you can have this over one of the biggest retailers in the universe if you just use the most simplest data that you have in your system, which is how to reach the people that you've already reached and how do you serve them more. Just serve, right? That's what people want.
I want to tell you about something Amazon did today, and then I want to go back to a book yourself solid concept of the list of 20, the network of 90.
Yes.
My assistant, I asked her to return a cable, an audio cable that I was using for, from one mixer to another for podcasting. And it was a $5 cable, and she went to return it, and Amazon said, sure, we'll return it. Don't worry about sending it back. They actually said you can keep the cable because it's only $5, but we'll give you your money back. I was dumbfounded.
It's a beautiful feeling, isn't it? Because then from there, you've got that, positive experience of, wow, they trust me. I now trust them.
Oh yeah. I mean, I spend 6 figures a year at Amazon, easy. So I would hope that, I get a $5 cable, but I never thought that there'd be somebody on the other end that would make a decision. Yeah, let's give it back to them. Now, maybe it's an algorithm. Maybe it's an algorithm that said, geez, this guy spends a lot of money. Let's do this thing where we just say, don't worry about that, and it'll impress him. But even if it's not a human being, I'll take it. I'll take the algorithm doing it because I thought it was pretty cool.
No question. Rob Hatch, who runs the business with me here at Owner Media Group, I think he came up with a phrase, but we both love it. It's called "to automate is human." So we use technology as often as we can to find ways to put a real human face on something. For instance, we send an automated newsletter, but you can always just hit reply and it hits a real live human and I can talk back. And I can tell you that for such a really simple trick, it's amazing how many people go, is this really you? And I'll take like a photo with a Post-it note or something. I have a bunch of index cards
like
and
with the newspaper and the date, you know.
Hi, Jenny. And then, I'll send Jenny back a picture. It's really me. Yeah. And I learned that trick from Sir Richard Branson, who has over 400 companies and is working on putting a hotel on the moon. If he's not busy enough to hit reply, I'm not busy enough to hit reply. I'm blessed.
Yeah. So this is one of the things that's very important about email newsletters these days is, I don't think you have to have it be your personal email that but it still needs to be an email that goes to somebody, and the do not reply is something we should stay away from. That do not reply email, it is so impersonal. It requires that the person who's receiving the email go search around for an email to send back. Would you agree with that? Is that your philosophy also?
Agreed. That's kind of one of my go-to weird jokes when I start talking about email marketing is if your email comes from do not reply at please God don't write back to me.com, how in the world do I think we're going to try to have a business relationship here?
So one of the concepts in Book Yourself Solid is the list of 20, and the other is the network of 90. And the list of 20 are 20 people that you believe that if you knew, you'd be able to add value to their life and they'd be able to add value to your life. They would move your life forward in some way, and you'd be sure that you can figure out a way to move their life forward in some way. And then each day you find a way to make a connection with at least one of them. It's a very simple concept. If you don't make a connection with somebody, you either move them to the bottom of the list and you reach out to them the next month, or you just take them off the list if you feel like maybe it's not happening, it's not working out. And then you add somebody else to this list, because you should look around you and see who are the people that you want to meet. Simple. The network of 90, the idea is that if you have a way of staying in touch with 90 people inside your network each month, then you'll continue to build stronger and stronger relationships with them. And there are a few ways that I suggest people do this kind of keep in touch. It's meaningful and simple and really quite easy. But the reason I keep it at 90 is twofold. One, because it just rhymes. Network and 90, they rhyme. Both starts with ends. But also more importantly, because it's a demonstration that you don't need lots and lots of people in your network to be booked solid. Just a small handful of people that have the ability to help you move forward and you maybe help them move forward will often put more valuable clients or customers inside your business than a massive newsletter list of some kind. Now, believe me, I love having a big newsletter subscriber base that I can talk to on a regular basis. It makes a huge difference in many ways, but depending on the kind of business you have, that may actually not even be relevant. And your point that, in terms of Kevin's article, 1,000 true fans could be 90 true fans. It could be even 15 true fans could send you enough business to keep you in Sundays all year long.
Yeah. It's when people are always walking their way through these elaborate plans of how they're going to make some kind of a personalized business work for them. They're always telling me these like crazy, once I get 1,000 readers on my blog and blah, blah, blah. If you need $100,000 or so a year, if you want 10,000 a month, you can find 5 people who will pay you 2,000 a month. And that's 120 a year. That's it. 5 human beings, $2,000. Now, I would rather try to find a business where I could do that. I'd rather find a business where I can make love to 5 people. Just, I love you. Here's all my time. Here's an entire month of service, you 5 people. $2,000 a head. I get 10,000. I get 120. I'm done. Right. My business doesn't run that way because I need to cover more people and more expenses and stuff like that. And I have slightly different goals. But most people I talk to would be pretty happy to make 120 grand a year. That's all they've got to chase to get that. And by the way, 5, with the 2,000 is so that if you lose one, you still have 80% of your revenue coming in. Yeah. You're not going to die. You've got 80% because you got 8,000. Easy.
Okay. So let's figure out a way to marry that up with the idea that businesses should think about themselves as media companies. If we don't need to go really broad, big and wide, why would we need to see ourselves as a media company?
Because the way to attract those right 5 or so people sometimes takes some time, or sometimes the process or the product that we're selling costs a lot. So, I'll tell you, I've got a guy, Matt, who runs a fly fishing lodge out in Idaho, and he probably needs more than $10,000 a month to cover what it takes to run a fly fishing lodge. This is for corporate type retreats. So Matt needs to get on the ear of all the kinds of people who want to run company events, and he's got to do it in such a way that when it's time for them to book that event, they're going to want to pay attention. So it's probably not necessarily fly fishing fans that he's got to reach. He's got to reach the kind of people who book those kinds of events. So does Matt write a fly fishing blog? It would make sense because he runs a fly fishing place. Maybe Matt's newsletter or blog or whatever he's going to do is more like how to, adventure, travel, and events or something like that. And so he starts interviewing other people who do other kinds of things. He starts finding ways to package. So maybe one time you come to his lodge in Idaho and sometimes you go to this other. Maybe he starts an affiliate relationship where he can start, selling other people's events, and he gets a bite of it because he's the one who brought him in, because he's the guy who has the media. Once you get people's attention, the way I look at it is sort of like shining your bat signal. Once you get the ear of the kind of person you're hoping to try to reach and serve, then you can think of all the different ways you can serve them. So in any kind of business, why we have to think of ourselves as a media business is we have to tell stories that resonate with the kind of people we hope to serve. My company's called Owner Media Group. When you and I are talking, somebody on this, watching this is going to go, man, I kind of like the way this guy thinks. And they're going to want to look at what I do. The way that they figured it out is because this is also media, right? So we have to share what our minds work like and how we do what we do so that people go, oh, this is where I belong. I'm an insider here because these are my people, right? We always feel so much better when we're amongst our people. When you started doing things with heroic public speaking, when you started kind of getting into a little bit into your acting roots, my next book is going to be about video games. I love talking to people about video games, and I've been running into more and more grownups who never would admit to anybody else that they play games, and they're all in their 40s, 50s, 60s. By the way, the most intense, most hours spent in video games, ages 60 to 80. That's the most hours.
Really?
60 to 80. This isn't kid stuff. Retirees, they're going to go play shuffleboard? They can go mow people down in Call of Duty or something like that. They can go play Grand Theft Auto.
I actually wanted to address Batman and video games, so I'm glad you brought that up. So I want to get back to Batman in just a minute, but I want to address something that I know you've heard many times. I'm sure you've gotten this question a lot, but it continues to come up. So I want to bring your perspective to it.
Sure.
On one of our mentoring calls just 2 days ago, a few people were still wrestling with the philosophy of sharing everything you have in any way you possibly can, and not worrying that you're not going to be able to book business afterwards, that, once you've given it away, then it's gone, that it no longer is yours, that you no longer have it, that it's you have nothing to sell. This is something that people continue to wrestle with. You and I may have come to this work from a different perspective right from the beginning for whatever reason. But I'd like you to address it, because even though it seems like something that we address often, and if you look at people who are very successful in the kind of businesses that we run that have this quote unquote media driven philosophy, they're very successful, but yet still this issue comes up. So could you address this for us, please?
Well, first I want to say that I've been at this a while now, which is a little weird to say, but I started blogging in 1998 when it was called journaling. So I realized that I'm heading towards 20 years in a space that some people still think of as new, which makes me like a fossil. But in the process, I've come across, including yourself, many wonderful, smart, brilliant people who do what I do in some way. We make media, we blog, we consult. We have very similar businesses. 100% of my friends and colleagues who share everything way beyond the line of what you're supposed to share are very successful, have boats, have nice homes, have lots of money, have all the things that they've ever wanted, have happiness, which is way more fun than money. 100% of them, not 95%, not even 98%, 100% of them have all that. Conversely, 80 or more % of my friends who are saying, I'm worried and I'm trying to hold my stuff in, are nearly unemployed, are underemployed, don't have enough money, or are starting to get their thoughts back into a day job. And can you pass my resume around when you're speaking? That should tell you like that. I don't have to explain why. I could just say, hey, anecdotally, it turns out that everyone who shares everything makes way more than you and is way more successful than you. So if you're not feeling successful and you're holding stuff back, it's, you know, it's kind of a flawed logic. Don't fight me on that, but it's true. Guys like Tim Sanders. Tim Sanders writes a book called Deal Storming, in which he gives away all kinds of ideas on how to be a better sales negotiator. Tim gets booked on this all the time, just like you do, just like I do. We get paid tens of thousands of dollars to go stand in front of a crowd and talk in like 40 minutes about something that you take, you know, months to unpack if you read the book. It would be cheaper to buy the book. You could get it $10 or $12 on Kindle or something like that, than to have Michael or I fly somewhere. And yet people pay for it all the time because they want the human experience, and they want what I always think of as the last mile. The last mile in telephone topic is, so your central office and all the wires, you know, from the central office to your house is all this stuff that sets up all your wire and your cable and all that sort of stuff. The last mile is the pole to the house. The last mile is 90% of the problems happen there. 90% of the time something goes wrong with your cable. It's not back in some, you know, central office somewhere in, you know, downtown Manhattan or something. It is always in some tiny little squirrel bit through a line right outside your house, or a tree branch fell right outside your house, or the screw finally corroded and it's down. It's called the last mile. So as much as we share, and we share 100% of all our great ideas, someone will say to us, oh, but this is my specific organization, and I really need you to come in and make it for me. That's where all the money is. That's where all the extra money is that you're worried that you're not going to book. It's in tell me about me. I'll tell you that 2 companies came up to me at the same time in 2009. One of them was a blue pill that if you take it and the results last more than 4 hours, you should call a doctor. And then shortly thereafter, the pink company said the same thing. And it's the same pill, the same thing, just 2 different colors. And I said, well, I did a little bit of work with the blue pill company. And they were like, well, but we're the pink pill company. I'm like, how the hell different do you think it's going to be? You're the same company, same drug, sex. It's the same thing, right? And but I will tell you that every single person who's ever given me their money, it's always because they think they're a beautiful and unique snowflake. And I am in the beautiful and unique snowflake business, evidently.
And clearly, you know a lot about sex.
Yes, sir.
Is that the next book?
Let's talk about sex with Chris Brogan. That's, you know, that's an interesting concept. Maybe I'll do that one after my video game book, because that's how nerdy I am.
So I want to talk about Batman in a minute. I want to go to some personal stuff first. You and I have connected around this in the past. One of the things one of the ways that I see work and the challenges that we face is that many of our business problems are just personal problems in disguise. And when something is going wrong in my business, I first need to look at myself and identify what I may be doing that gets in the way. And also, is there anything dysfunctional in my mind in terms of the way that I operate on a day-to-day basis? And, you know, since I was in high school, I would flirt with slight depression, and every once in a while I would have some more significant depression. And I've had to figure out ways over the years to manage that when I was working and had a lot of responsibilities and wanted to work at a high level. Usually depression and working very productively and intensely at a high enjoyable level, they don't usually mix. And I know you've spoken publicly about dealing with some issues of depression over the years. So I never used to talk about this, and still it's not something I talk about often, but I think what I found is that it's helpful to talk about it, because sometimes when you're doing quite well in the public eye, people make this assumption that everything is easy, everything is perfect, you don't have any problems, and super simple, you just print money basically. And I've never found it work that way, maybe for some others, but I haven't. So I'd love you to address this. And, how do you manage all the responsibilities around work when you're not feeling that fired up or charged up, and don't have a lot of urgency around, doing the things that you would need to do in your work?
It's a great set of questions. And one of the things I want to say is that when we talk about things like success, we always think it's this great line that goes up. And what I always say is it's like a saw blade, right? Like there's so many deep valleys in success, and you never, ever, ever have a straight line. Donald Trump went bankrupt a few different times, is still on amassing his fortunes and all that. Kanye West is reporting he's 53 million in the hole right now. Even though his personal wealth is doing plenty fine. So there's lots of people who have these problems or find themselves in bad straits. And those are just finances. But finances always follow other stuff going on in your life, right? They are always bellwethers for each other. When money is tight, relationships are tricky. When money is tight, that means business is failing for some reason, and that's usually something to do with your personal life as well. And I would say that the way I go after it, I mean, one of your questions was, so what do you do when your, chips are down basically, and how do you keep plugging through? The way I do it, I would say is I don't allow for many excuses. So with regards to depression, I say I'm depressed and I still have to deliver something here. I'm depressed and I have to hit at least some minimums, because I'm not going to, I'm not going to be in business to serve anyone if I don't get out of this bed. And the reason I talk so much about it is most of my friends think that you have to either be fully ready to tackle the world or you have something going on in your life. And if you have something going on in your life, you can't be successful. You can't book yourself solid. You can't do all of the things that need doing. But it's not true. It's not true. You can be failing and falling down and pick up and keep going. I can't remember who said it, and I'm really sad because I just saw the quote today and I thought I'd remember. It's Joe Louis, I think, the boxer. He said, the successful athlete is the one who picks himself up right after he can't anymore. And it's basically, I've just really mangled that, but basically it's when you can't get up anymore, you get up. And that's, I think, how depression works. I think that's how, when we're successful in depression, so to speak, when we're successful in business, it's when we say, man, this blows, but I'm just going to put this out. Yeah. And sometimes we just we kind of bide our time until we can get back on our feet. And other times you just fight where you can fight, right? I mean, I had some my most recent depression, and I am just on the edges of coming out of it, so I can talk really vividly about it. I can tell you that getting out of bed, I didn't get out of bed a lot of times. My laptop works perfectly fine in my bed. I can do my work in my bed. And so why leave it? And I didn't leave my house for a week or two here and there. So I can tell you that, there's some pretty low levels of functioning, and you could still go on and be some kind of an entrepreneur if you don't have to show up at some office. Other people, it's a little harder. But I can tell you that sort of in closing that out or what to do or what to think about, all I really did was chip away. I just chipped away. I said, well, at least I can get 10 emails out of my inbox, because there's a lot of stuff piling up in my inbox. At least I can do this one favor for this person in my 20, because I want to make sure that person in my 20 still feels loved and acknowledged, because my depression isn't their problem. Mm-hmm. And so I just worked on those things. My 90, who have I served lately? Who haven't I heard from? I better drop them a line and make sure they're still feeling good, right? I could do those kinds of things. And then by the time my energy came back and by the time I'd sort of got the cloud a little bit away from me, things started picking up. So I think that's how we all have to deal with it. And I guess what I most hope people listening to you and I talk about this think is, oh, he just said I can't use it as an excuse. You have to say, I have depression, and it's another improv thing.
It's yes. And if there was one thing that I hope I can help people overcome in this work is this idea that they're not ready yet. We hear this a lot. Well, I'm not ready to start that work, or I'm not ready to go out on my own, or I'm not ready to whatever it is. And of course, rarely are we ready. Most people who get up to exciting stuff are just figuring it out as they go. And I think that many folks who are afraid of not being ready, I think they may get it intellectually, but I hope each individual recognizes that it's there's this myth of being ready. We're rarely ever ready, and all we can do is stay in the moment and do the best that we can at that very moment. And as a result, we will continue to get better at whatever it is we've chosen to do. And we'll feel ready to have done the thing we just did. And we might not feel ready to do the thing that we're about to do, but you'll get more comfortable at being uncomfortable in that, place of, I'm not really sure exactly how to do this thing. That's something that I just hope people can take away from this conversation, from all the work that we do. I know this is a big thing for Chris as well. So, crossing our fingers, hoping. Now, I just wanted to mention here that Kathy said, just a comment, thank you for bringing up this topic regarding managing when you are, quote, in a hole, end quote, of some sort, depression, business hole, etc. You're very welcome, Kathy. And thank you, Chris, for that. So here's what you can do now. If you'd like, you can put in questions, as many questions that you have, questions about anything that you want. Chris will answer any of them, and he does it with grace and respect. So please feel free. There's never a dumb question, ever. You never have to worry about that. In fact, sometimes if you're worried about asking a question because you think, oh, it's a dumb question, or nobody wants to hear it, it's likely that there are other people with that same question thinking the same thing and are worried to say it or ask it as a result. But in fact, if you ask it, A, you need the answer for yourself, which is really important. And B, you're actually standing up as a leader in the group and asking the question that needs to be asked. So please feel free. Don't worry about asking the wrong question. We're here for you in whatever way we can. And as those questions are coming in, Chris, let's get back to Batman. Let's get back to Batman's. I don't know if Batman is a video game, but of course he's one of our greatest superheroes. You're working a lot now. I think you're working on a book that connects the play in video games to the way that you can play in work. And I'd love you to dive into that a little bit, because I think it's really fascinating. And I know a lot of people would love to hear about it.
So there's many Batman video games. The most recent series would be called Batman and then Arkham. So Arkham Knight, Arkham something, I forget. There's a whole bunch. And so I'm writing a book called Win Your Own Game. In the very first big chapter in Trust Agents was called Make Your Own Game. Trust Agents was my New York Times bestseller with Julian Smith. And I've always had this idea that we can,
let me just interrupt 1 second. Trust Agents is Chris's most popular book, absolutely fantastic book. I love it. I love even more Freaks Shall Inherit the Earth.
Thank you.
That's another one of Chris's books. I would say read that first, read that today, because you are a freak, just like we are a freak. And I love this book. I think it's some of my favorite work of yours. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, one funny thing about Freaks is that it was absolutely not successful in the US, and I received 0 speech requests from it, but it's evidently big in China. So I get a lot of emails. I'm talking to this kid, DJ, who wants to go to Stanford. He's 18 right now. I had another guy who wrote me an email saying his parents don't like his girlfriend because they think that she's demotivating, but he really loves her. So what do we do? So I'm having the most interesting conversations with Chinese people about Freaks. So it is also my favorite.
That's interesting.
So the idea of the new book was basically, how do we take this concept of video games being, a waste of time, this multi-billion-dollar industry where millions of people evidently pretend they don't play games, and how do we learn something from it? And, I'll tell people, for instance, in most recent speeches where I spoke to HR professionals, I said, what's different between annual reviews and video games? Video games give you reviews every few seconds. Feedback is the 100% biggest difference in video games in real life. You play Angry Birds. Why do people play Angry Birds or Cut the Rope or any of these games that you look at maybe and think this is stupid? But I bet somebody here probably actually plays it. They just don't want to admit it. You play it because when you pull that bird back and make him smash into the house and kill all the pigs, immediately, because the machine says you got 1 star or 2 stars or 3, and you're like, how come I didn't get 3 stars? And then you go back and you do this work. And there's a word, Jane McGonigal explained it in Reality is Broken, called blissful productivity, that says we humans will invest hours in stupid things, more so that, or as much as we will a full-time job. And so her book kind of says, well, why do we do this? Or, why does it matter? Mine is like, awesome. Let's use those same mechanics to make work better. Let's make business better. Let's not just say work's stupid, video games are interesting. Let's say, how do we make work more interesting like a video game? So I'm working through the processes of which systems, which actions, which things can I pull from this game world and make you go, oh, I totally would do that. And really two simple ones. Metrics in video games. There's a way to win the game, and then there's a way to sort of conquer certain objectives. The way I make all my money is by not trying to win, like be number one in some industry or something like that. I hit certain objectives, which then give me the prize that I want, because success is something personal. Success is something you define in a lot of ways. And so I set my game up, I align my game differently than the rest of the world. So I get the success I want, while other people are frustrated that they're failing at this other game that they don't even want. It just happens.
Let me jump on that, because it sounds to me it's like the difference between going for approval and results. You know, trying to win this overall game, be number one in your industry, the most popular person, that's about approval, because it's an idea. Whereas I want to try to make this particular thing happen because it will then produce X, Y, and Z, et cetera. That's about going for results. And hopefully the results you choose to go after are the results that please you in many ways, as opposed to an idea. And this is something that has really changed for me over the years. Look, I didn't become an actor when I was in college because I didn't want approval. I don't know a lot of actors that become actors because they don't want any approval. And over the years, I've had to work away against that and not, just make choices that are going to be impressive or popular, and focus now on what works for the life that I want to create for my family. And it also seems like what you're saying in terms of the games is that when you produce a result, you get very excited about that result, and you're more inclined to do more of the thing that got you that result. So we just came home from Heroic Public Speaking Live, and it was a big success on a number of different levels. And I was so excited about what we were able to do there. I immediately came home and started working on the next one. I mean, when I say immediately, I mean the next day. Because when you have a feeling of satisfaction that, oh my God, all that work I put in, it actually did something. It worked. I want to do more of it. And it propels you forward. So it seems like there's a tie in there to what you're saying about video games. Would you agree?
Absolutely. So there's so much tying to feedback, achievements. There's all these things that we get in video game worlds that we could just as easily make up in our real world. We just have to think about it a little differently. We have to think about, a lot of times we play sort of open-endedly at our lives. We just keep, showing up. We keep going to work. We keep hoping the bank goes better. We keep, hope there's not so many bad bills this month. I hope my car doesn't break down. We just sort of wait for everything to land on us. But if we had objectives, I was thinking about this. This is totally random, Michael. I went to the bank because I had a check that was in my pocket for not a lot. It was like $380. And it had been in my pocket for months. And I kept taking it out of other pockets and then, in and out of clothing for months. It was getting ragged. And I was like, I'm so stupid. Just go to the bank. And I go to the bank, sometimes, as people are wont to do. And I cashed it. And I cashed it just because I don't even know why. Because I had just had my deposit in from work. So I knew how much money I had in the bank. And I figured, I'll just take this money. So now I have $360 in my pocket because I spent some buying my daughter lunch today. And I suddenly thought, wow, that's pretty close to a round trip ticket to Puerto Rico. I could buy on JetBlue. JetBlue sells a round trip ticket to Puerto Rico for like 300 and something bucks from Boston. I thought, so if I just got another couple $100 just for, I don't know, a hotel room and maybe some rum drinks, I'm all the way to going to write part of my book in Puerto Rico if I want. And it's going to take me 40 minutes of work to get there. We don't think this way, right? Like we worry about the dumbest things, or we don't think about how our money is, or what. We don't set little plans up in our life. Video games are all about, hey, here's a plan. I've set it up for you. And what I can tell you about life is that no one's waiting to set your life up for you. You've got to do it.
The reason I've got this new boat is because I spent years setting up this plan to make this happen.
It's a beautiful boat. And I am sure there were lots of times where you thought, maybe not Nobu tonight, because I'm going to get this boat. And that makes you feel so good. There is no more delicious ham sandwich on white bread than the one that says, I'm going to buy a boat.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right. So listen, we got a bunch of questions, and let's see how many we can hit with expediency, because they're all wonderful. So Nina says, part 1. Hi guys, great webinar. I have a question regarding building a media company. I have a consultancy company where we work with corporate companies and organizations where we help them build a thriving culture. It just want to, how it does that. Okay. A thriving culture and offer them leadership solutions. And where's her second part? Oh, here she is. Part 2, support them in this self-leadership journey. How can we reach our potential clients in the best way? Social media, podcasting, speaking, or everything wrapped up into one. Thank you.
Couple ways you could go after that, Nina. Convincing people to write is sort of like convincing them to, that breaking their arm is a good idea. Like you could say, you should probably break your arm, and people are going to smile politely at you and not do it. However, what if you did little interviews with them? What if you did give me some advice? Humans are just dying to give you their opinion on things. And if you ask for advice, they're dying to give you that too. Poise it as, there are other leaders in this space. What would you want them to know about being a good leader? Or what mistakes do you want them not to make? Or, whatever you want to angle that as. You could have a great leadership series with the people that you're helping now, and then use that as your kind of public space, right? You could say, these are clients that we work with. You could totally disclose that. But you could say, these are the kinds of people we like to work with. I can tell you one thing we love in life. We love to be around people that we think are like us. And we're always sort of looking our way up. Esquire magazine doesn't sell watches to the kinds of people that you see with the watch on their wrist. Leonardo DiCaprio doesn't need a Tag Heuer watch. He sells it to people who say, if I want to be more like Leo, I should have that watch. So you're thinking, make this interview series perhaps where people say, I want to be the kind of person Nina interviews.
Like Chris Brogan. Exactly.
I would like to interview Nina. You're right.
Yeah. So, okay. So thanks for that. Here's from George. George says, I'm getting stuck on creating my online courses. I have the courses and teaching them now. I know the content and I know it works, but I keep hitting the resistance when it comes to creating the videos and putting up my courses in Rainmaker.
Oh, George. Well, first, I love Rainmaker. Second, I sell something called Online Course Maker. So you're speaking up my tree here. When you're hitting resistance, there's a few reasons. One is you're afraid you're not going to cover enough. You're afraid that you're going to stutter, that people are going to think you're dumb, whatever. First off, one of the biggest problems we all have in life is we worry that people are looking at us. It's always about themselves, right? It's always about you, right? Like you're not sitting around when you're absorbing something. You're not thinking, what's Michael Port really like? You're like, I hope I get something out of this, and that's what's true about your courses. People are hoping, George, that you make them smarter and better. And if you can put in your heart that you're there to make their world better, then you stop worrying as much about you. You start thinking, what am I going to do? If Nina's in your course, what am I going to do to make this make sense for Nina? Or how am I going to say this in a way? And if I stutter a little, it's going to be okay. George, I drink, I burp, I smash the microphone. I can't tell you how many times in my interviews. It's terrible, but it still gets done. And when I shoot video, the only thing that's going to ever get you better at shooting video, eye contact, decent light, spit filter on your mic, and practice. You're just going to have to keep hitting record. And if you hit record a ton of times and delete a ton of times, you're better than a lot of people who don't hit record once. I promise you. That's what's missing. It's like running. You got to start by running from one foam pole to the second foam pole, and then you wheeze for 2 more foam poles, and then you get to the next run. And then after a while, you forget which foam pole you forgot, and you just keep running. That's how it's like. You just got to practice it a bit more. You'll feel a lot better. I promise you.
Dan says, I have thousands of connections on LinkedIn and Facebook. How do I whittle it down to the 20, 90, and then interact with them? And how do I identify the best 90, he says?
I don't know who's the best 90. I could say I would invite them to your newsletter first and foremost, because if they're hanging out at LinkedIn, at Facebook, that's like you hanging out at bars all the time. Eventually, they got to come to your office. Once you get them to the newsletter, make sure your newsletter is the kind that people can hit reply, and start with the people who are most communicative. They're not ever your best customers, by the way. The ones who communicate the most are the ones who just want to emotionally connect with you, not always the buyer. But I can tell you that it's a good start, because then at least you have a voice to speak to and write to. And then the right 90 are going to start showing up when your cash register rings. Don't worry about who's the right 90. They'll self-select. I can tell you with just one couple of clicks of Infusionsoft or now Rainmaker's financial backend who my best customers are. But they're not always the first right 90. The first right 90 are the ones who are willing to give you ideas that are going to shape how you take the rest of the tribe ahead.
I love it. That's a really fantastic answer. Bren says, I am dissolving my first business and launching a startup. How do I keep my confidence strong while I'm working through the transition of one company that did not succeed and launching a new one?
I would say a regular daily appointment with the Think Big Manifesto is one good answer. I think that book is a great shot in the arm for when you're working on something. And I think it reminds you not to deal with the tiny grinds. At the same time, I think also look at small victories. So start at a 30,000 feet, but then have a 5-foot thing. All you got to do when you're starting a startup is remember, I'm in service of others, and just serve them, serve them, serve them. The reason we lose confidence in a startup is when we're just not getting enough interaction with people that say your idea is good. Just serve people. When you help other people, they're going to tell you if the idea is good or bad. And if it's bad, try to get rid of the thought that they're saying you're bad, and you're going to have some magic. It's just going to be power. But I'd say, like I said, if you don't already, you probably already have Think Big Manifesto, just crack it open again and read it a little more often. It's going to help.
Hey, Chris, Don says, big fan of Chris's It's Not About the Tights book about bravery. What would you tell the audience what the It's Not About the Tights book is?
Sure. So I had, this is probably one of my favorite books too. You could just Google It's Not About the Tights, and it's only in digital format. I think there's a CreateSpace format. It came out weird though. So, I mean, just forgive me. It's a book about bravery. And it was this whole idea that if superheroes were going to thrive in this world, that you needed 4 things. And it spells out CAPE: confidence, acceptance, permission, and then later practice, and then execution. And so your CAPE is what guides you in your journeys. And I would say that a lot of people have had really good reports back from that book. And there's actually even an audio book that I think is available at betterlisten.com.
Fantastic. So Elizabeth has a question. It's essentially about price objection. She says, I need to get more clients in my funnel. My current clients are very happy and my results are extraordinary, she says. But my price point is really high comparative to other wedding entertainers, and I'm getting a price objection.
I'm sure if you've read Book Yourself Solid, there's some great advice in there. But I will tell you that my take on it is that when someone's arguing about price, they're never arguing about price, especially in the wedding business. Yeah. What they're really saying is, are you going to make my event so amazing for my guests? I went to a wedding fairly recently with a live band who I am absolutely blanking on the name. But they were sort of this sort of Weezer, but even slightly more punk rock Weezer. They did incredible covers and everything from like Baby Got Back to Frank Sinatra type music. And it was just a real fun time. And the band was every bit the star of the wedding than the bride and the groom. Your job as a wedding performer is to say to said family who's putting this together, I am going to make people remember this wedding and talk about it for months to come. I'm going to make them say, wow, that was a great wedding. Who was that band again? Because I want them to be that interested in knowing more about it. It's never about the price. So don't worry about it. And don't ever work that you have to weasel yourself down to some different price unless you're dreadfully hungry. And then, we all have to do that. There's whore business for all of us when we have to go below that number where we're suddenly not saying yes to something we want. But for the most part, just stick to your price guns because it's never about the price. It's 100% about the experience. And if those people say you're not the right person for me, that's a good thing.
Yeah. When we get more confident, it often gets easier to stick to your guns with respect to pricing. And it's not just how much money you have or don't have, but it is often driven by confidence and an association with value that you provide. But we get weird about prices and we get weird about money. Do you know, if I'm having a conversation with somebody that I want to bring in for an event or something, and they want more than I want to pay, I don't have any issue saying, oh, I don't want to pay that. This is what I'm willing to pay. And if they want to take it, they take it. If they don't, they don't. It's not a big deal. There's nothing weird to me about it or uncomfortable. We often get so personally involved in the pricing from an approval and rejection angle. So if they're rejecting my prices, they're rejecting me, and maybe you haven't made the case yet. So maybe they are, but that shouldn't be something that we get down on ourselves about personally. We need to then look at this as a business problem, just like you were selling a product. You're selling a light. Well, if they're not paying what you want for that light, what are you going to do about it? You're probably not going to get as emotionally involved with it as you are when they're paying for you. So making a disconnect between the money and the emotional aspects of it is so helpful. And it's really not that big a deal. And if, look, someone doesn't want to pay what you are charging, then you've got to find the people who want to pay that, either because you've been able to demonstrate your value, A, or B, are the kind of people who express their values through what they buy. Do you see, that's the other thing, is that pricing has very little to do with you. We buy things to express our value. So if people look at what I spend on boating equipment and accessories and my boat, et cetera, and fuel, they would go, you're out of your freaking mind, because they don't value that the way that I do. To me, it's the most valuable experience outside of my family that I can have. But there are other things that I just don't want to spend money on because I don't value it that much. It's not that important to me. So there were certain things that were not that important to Amy and I when we got married. We didn't have a video crew there. People were surprised about that. But we go, you know what? We don't need it, but we want great photographers. So it's not always about your services. A lot of it has to do with just the way they express their values. And if you are not part of that value structure for them, they're not going to pay the bigger prices and then move on. Okay. Just a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up. Is that all right, buddy?
Perfect.
Okay. So someone asked, Dan said, what was the other program besides Infusionsoft? Was it Rainmaker? Yes. Rainmaker is what Chris is referencing. I'm a fan of it. I use Infusionsoft, but I'm also a fan of Rainmaker. Brian Clark is a friend of both of ours. That's a platform that his company produced. I know you use it now. And he says, is that the one that interfaces with Salesforce, or is it different?
I think Rainmaker probably has some kind of a connector to Salesforce. I think Infusionsoft does as well. If you really love Salesforce, then you can stick with that. If you're evaluating between the two, I would always pick Rainmaker, only because of the other things it allows me to have, like a media platform, and the money integration and all that. Salesforce ends up costing a bit more, depending on what you're trying to put together. But yeah, it's a platform. And I'm always fond of saying that no one ever asked Hemingway what kind of pencils he used. But at the same time, I love the fact that, Rainmaker costs around $100 or so a month, but then it's all handled. My merchant stuff's handled. My platform is handled. Everything I have to do to make content is handled. And my email service provider is tied to it. So everything just works for me. And to your point about where we put our value and stuff like that, I've had people say to me things like, well, I really don't want to afford that kind of a system. I could do it a lot cheaper with PayPal and Bailing Wire. And I say, yes, but I could click one button and know exactly who bought what and when and how important they are to my business. And so I can make my list of 90 while we're talking right now. And it's a matter of what you want to put your time and investment into.
So I'm going to finish with this question. This will be our last question, Chris.
Okay.
There's a whole slew of comments in here about thank you for, I'll go through those in a minute, but I just want to get Sarah's question first. She says, I love working with entrepreneurs and I tend to empathize with their dollar problems. I want to cut special deals with people to show them that they matter to me. I feel like I should not charge full price to people I care about. How do I fix this wrong mentality? Well, first, before you answer that, first, it's interesting that I'm not saying it is a right or a wrong mentality, but in her question, she's saying she does not like having this mentality and she wants to fix this for herself because it's actually getting in her way. That's my assumption in her question.
Yeah. Well, so the very first thing I can say is that when you are ever on an airplane for more than once, you will realize that the flight attendant tells you that you're supposed to put your own mask on first before helping other passengers. And what they mean is you're going to run out of air and not help anybody. You're going to die. In military situations where there's a hostage involved, even if the hostage is wounded, you have to clear the room of all the bad guys first and then take care of the hostage, meaning you got to take care of your personal safety before you handle the hostage. When you are helping all these entrepreneurs, you are not going to help anyone once you go out of business. you will be unemployed and you will be back at, Best Buy looking to see if someone wants this digital camera or that digital camera because you didn't charge what you were supposed to charge. One way to help entrepreneurs is to help the ones who actually need the help and who are looking to invest in it. Well, who I serve at Owner Media isn't all entrepreneurs. It's people who are ready to invest in their business. There's lots of people who say they're entrepreneurs, but they haven't taken risk. Part of entrepreneurship, the definition, the base definition, is assume risk and then accept a higher amount of reward for that risk that they've assumed. Some people are mostly just saying, I'm not employable, or I wish I didn't have a job. That's not an entrepreneur. And I suspect that's who you're investing a lot of your time with. So stop it. Start looking for ways that you can help the people who are serious about taking an action. And one way they're serious is they're going to invest. Michael ate ham sandwiches to afford a boat. I have no idea what Michael ate. When I decide I want to go down to Puerto Rico, it means I'm going to skip some Diet Cokes and lattes, right? It's all what we choose to spend our money on. And if you're worth it, they're going to spend their money on you.
You just reminded me of that Bob Newhart video. You ever seen it where he plays the therapist?
Yes.
It's fantastic. $5 or 5 minutes, $5, and he'll solve any problem you have. So if you haven't seen that, guys, go search for Bob Newhart therapist on YouTube. It'll kill you. It'll crack you up. Yes, 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 and yes. And there was something else that I wanted to say based on your question, and then I thought of Bob Newhart, and it took my thought away. What was it? Yes. The difference between a contractor and an entrepreneur is vast. And I have recently had an experience with a firm that wanted to work with us and get the rewards of entrepreneurship, but all the risk managed as if they were contractors. They wanted to have it both ways. I said, you can't have it both ways. You get one or the other. And there's nothing wrong with being a contractor. And there's nothing better about being an entrepreneur. They're just two different things. But decide which one you are, and it'll affect the way that you approach your business. And then in this particular case, decide if you're working with contractors or entrepreneurs. And if you're working with entrepreneurs, they may see the world a little bit differently in terms of the way that they invest their dollars. Because what I've found is people who are entrepreneurs also will take more risk with their investments often. And I don't just mean financial investments. I don't mean, what kind of stocks they're buying. I mean, with respect to their learning or hiring other people, et cetera. And it makes a difference. Would you agree, Chris?
100%. Similar to my point that all of us that seem to be doing well share 100% of what we know. We're also the people who invest. When I had the chance to talk to Harvey McKay, legendary business leader from his great book, Swimming with the Sharks and all that, I said, you talk a lot about coaches. Do you have coaches? He said, Chris, I have dozens of coaches. I have joke coaches, speech coaches, tennis coaches. He has coaches galore. He invests hundreds of thousands a year to make him worth hundreds of millions a year. And I think that's the way you got to look at your clientele as well.
It's fantastic. chrisbrogan.com. Chris is one of my favorite people in this business. Chris, I want to say that I want everyone to hear this before we go. I don't know if you saw a couple weeks ago, I just wrote a little post on my Facebook profile, and my Facebook profile, as you know, is just really my friends. And there's a lot of work people in there, but they're real friends. It's small. It's 200 people, because I want to be able to say whatever I want to say, whenever I want to say it. And I put a little post there. I just said, I just want to thank a few people that, I've known for a long time in the industry, and some whom I've met more recently. But this is an industry where there's a lot of BS, and there are a lot of people selling a lot of pipe dreams. And there are few people who are absolutely honest, who have unbelievable integrity, and will always go out of their way to do whatever they can for you. And Chris Brogan is one of those people. So I mentioned him specifically in this little post, and I just wanted to thank him there and thank him publicly here for who he is. And unfortunately, you really shouldn't get a lot of props for being a person of integrity, but in our industry, it's actually quite a big deal. So you get a lot of props for it. So I just want to say thank you. And I know everybody else here feels the same way.
Well, you're very kind, Michael, and I'm very grateful to have been in your orbit for the few years that we have so far, and very grateful to count you amongst my friends. And one thing that people who are spending time with us inside this special little group should know is just that Michael is who he is 100% of the time. Off stage, on stage, maybe on a boat. I would say that he's the same guy, except that he laughs more when he's trying not to be professional.
That's probably true, because I have this big goofy smile. So listen, buddy, thanks. I'll let you go. You're fantastic. The thank yous are pouring in here. Uh, we can always do more together than we can alone. So make sure that you're connecting with your peers inside, either if you're in our mentoring program or if you're in Chris's secret team or anywhere else you have the opportunity to work with other people. So thank you, Chris, and thank you everybody else. Bye for now.